There comes a moment in every life when the road ahead is unclear. You've prayed, you've thought, you've asked for advice, but the path still looks dark. And it's right there in that moment of uncertainty that God often does his best work. When God shows the way, he doesn't always give us the full map. He gives us direction. He doesn't promise comfort, but he promises presence. God is not obligated to explain himself before he proves himself. Our responsibility is not to know everything. It is to trust the one who does. Too many people want God to bless a plan he was never consulted about. But when God shows the way, he goes before you. He clears what you cannot see, fights what you cannot handle, and opens doors no human power can shut. The problem is not that God is silent. The problem is that we're often moving too fast to listen. God's guidance usually comes one step at a time. He lights the path just enough so you must walk by faith and not by sight, and faith is not believing. God can. It's moving because you know he already has. When God shows the way, it may not be the easiest route, but it will always be the right one. It may stretch you, challenge you, and humble you, but it will never leave you alone. If God ordered your steps, you can trust the destination. So don't fear the unknown. If God is leading, the way may be narrow, but it will be secure. Because when God shows the way, he walks it with you. God gives direction, not always explanation, because his goal is not simply to inform us, but to transform us. If God explained everything before asking us to move, faith would be replaced by logic, and trust would be reduced to calculation. Direction requires dependence. Explanation often removes it. God is less interested in satisfying our curiosity than in shaping our character. When he points the way forward without answering every question, he is inviting us into a deeper relationship built on trust rather than control. Many people struggle because they want clarity before commitment. They want to know how it will work, how long it will take, what it will cost, and how it will end. But God often says, follow me, without filling in the details, not because he is unkind, but because he is wise. He knows that too much information too soon can weaken obedience. If you had all the answers, you might rely on the answers instead of relying on him. Direction keeps your eyes on God. Explanation can shift your eyes to the process. God's direction usually comes with responsibility. Once he points the way, the burden of movement shifts to us. Explanation might feel comforting, but it can also become an excuse for delay. How many people are standing still claiming they are waiting on God when God has already given direction? The issue is not a lack of instruction, it is a lack of trust. God has spoken clearly enough for the next step, but we hesitate because we want certainty beyond that step. Direction also requires humility. It forces us to admit that we don't know everything and never will. God is not required to justify his plans to us. He is God and we are not. When we demand explanations, we can unintentionally place ourselves in a position of authority over God, as if he must meet our standards of understanding before we obey. Direction reminds us of our place. It calls us to submit rather than negotiate. There is also protection in God's silence about the details. Some explanations would overwhelm us. Some truths, if revealed too early, would discourage us from ever starting. God often withholds information not to confuse us, but to guard us. He knows what lies ahead, and he knows what you can handle right now. Direction is given in mercy, not mystery for mystery's sake. Walking by direction rather than explanation builds spiritual maturity. It teaches patience, endurance, and reliance on God's voice. Each step taken without full understanding strengthens faith muscles that cannot be developed any other way. Trust grows when you see that God was faithful on the last step, even when you didn't understand it at the time. Over time, you realize that God's track record is more reliable than your need for clarity. Direction also keeps us flexible. When you're attached to explanations, you become attached to a specific outcome. But when you're attached to God's direction, you're willing to adjust as he leads. You learn that the goal is not the path itself, but obedience to the one who leads the path. God may redirect, pause, or reroute, and faith allows you to move with him instead of resisting him. In the end, direction without explanation teaches us a powerful truth. God can be trusted even when he is not fully understood. Obedience becomes an act of worship, not a response to full comprehension. And when you finally look back, you often realize that the direction God gave was more than enough. It led you exactly where you needed to be, even when you didn't know why at the time. God's presence matters more than clarity, because clarity can inform you, but presence can sustain you. There are seasons in life when knowing what will happen next would not remove fear, pain, or uncertainty. Even if the future were fully explained, the weight of walking through it would still remain. What truly makes the difference is not having all the answers, but knowing you are not walking alone. God's presence provides strength that information never could. Clarity focuses on outcomes, but presence focuses on relationship. When people seek clarity, they are often trying to regain control over a situation that feels unstable. God, however, invites us to surrender control and rest in his nearness. His presence reassures us that even if the path is unclear, the guide is faithful. You may not know where the road turns, but you know who is walking beside you, and that changes everything. God's presence brings peace that clarity cannot guarantee. You can understand a situation completely and still feel anxious, overwhelmed, or afraid. But when you are aware of God's presence, peace can exist even in confusion. That peace does not come from certainty, it comes from trust. It is the calm that settles in your spirit when you realize that God is bigger than the questions you cannot answer. There are moments when clarity is delayed, but presence is immediate. God does not always remove the fog from the road ahead, but he never removes himself from the journey. His presence is constant, steady, and reliable. When plans fail, when expectations are broken, and when prayers seem unanswered, his presence remains unchanged. That consistency becomes an anchor for the soul when everything else feels unstable. God's presence also brings courage. Fear thrives in isolation, but faith grows in companionship with God. When you sense that God is near, you find the strength to take steps you would never take on your own. You may not feel confident in the outcome, but you feel confident in the one who is with you. That confidence pushes you forward even when clarity is absent. Presence changes how we interpret our circumstances. Instead of asking, why is this happening? We begin to ask, what is God doing with me in this? The focus shifts from explanation to transformation. God's presence reminds us that we are not being abandoned in difficulty, we are being shaped through it. What feels like uncertainty may actually be a sacred space where God is working closely and personally. God's presence also corrects our priorities. When clarity becomes the goal, faith can become conditional. We trust God only when we understand him. But when presence becomes the priority, trust deepens regardless of understanding. We learn to value closeness with God over comfort and relationship over resolution. That kind of faith is not easily shaken by unanswered questions. Over time, those who rely on God's presence rather than clarity develop a deeper spiritual confidence. They discover that God has carried them through moments they never fully understood. Looking back, they may still not have all the answers, but they have something greater, a testimony of God's faithfulness. They realize that clarity would have explained the journey, but God's presence empowered them to survive it and grow through it. Faith moves before answers arrive because faith is not dependent on understanding. It is dependent on trust. Waiting for everything to make sense before acting often becomes a trap. Life rarely provides all the pieces of the puzzle at once, and if we insist on having clarity before stepping forward, we may never move at all. Faith, by its very nature, calls for action in the midst of uncertainty. It is the willingness to take steps when the path is not fully visible, knowing that God's hand is guiding every step. Faith requires courage, because moving without full understanding feels risky. Human nature resists uncertainty. Our instinct is to wait, plan, or gather more information. But God asks for a different posture, one of reliance, not reasoning. The stories of the faithful in Scripture often highlight this principle. People acted on God's promises before they saw the complete outcome. Abraham left his home before receiving a map. Moses led the people without knowing the final destination, and David stepped into battles he did not fully understand. Their faith moved first, and the answers came after they obeyed. Moving in faith before answers arrive also develops spiritual strength. When we act only after understanding, we rely on human reasoning. When we act before understanding, we rely on God. That reliance strengthens our relationship with Him. Each step taken without knowing the full plan teaches dependence, patience, and perseverance. It builds character and shapes our hearts to trust God more deeply because we experience firsthand that His guidance is sufficient even when the path is unclear. Faith also teaches us to distinguish between God's voice and our own fears. Waiting for answers can often amplify doubt and hesitation. We may become so focused on needing certainty that we miss the quiet prompting of God to move. Faith requires listening carefully and responding promptly, even when the answers are incomplete. The act of moving affirms that we believe God is faithful and capable, even when we cannot see the whole picture. It transforms uncertainty into opportunity for growth. Another reason faith must move before answers arrive is that timing matters. If we wait for complete understanding, we may miss the moment God has prepared for us. Opportunities often appear for a reason, and hesitation can close doors that God had opened. Faith calls us to step when the Spirit nudges, not when we feel fully ready. It requires obedience over comprehension, action over analysis. In doing so, we learn that God's timing is perfect, even when our plans and reasoning fall short. Faith moving first also invites God to demonstrate His power. When we wait for answers, we often try to handle challenges with our own strength. But stepping out in faith creates a space for God to work miraculously. It is in the tension of uncertainty and obedience that His power is revealed. Without that tension, the opportunity to see God's intervention and provision is diminished. Our action triggers His response, showing that reliance on Him is more effective than reliance on our own understanding. Finally, faith that moves before answers arrives transforms our perspective on life itself. We learn that obedience is more important than certainty, that trust is more valuable than knowledge, and that God's guidance is sufficient even when explanations are absent. Moving in faith is not reckless. It is confident dependence on a God who is greater than our questions and stronger than our fears. By taking steps before the answers come, we discover that faith is not just a belief, it is an active, living force that shapes our journey and brings God's presence into every step we take. God leads step by step because life is a journey that requires daily trust and continual dependence. He does not always reveal the full path at once, because if He did, our reliance would shift from Him to the plan. Step-by-step guidance ensures that our focus remains on God, not on trying to control the entire journey. Each step requires attention, obedience, and sensitivity to His voice, teaching us to walk in alignment with His will rather than our own understanding. When God reveals only the next step, it invites us to lean into Him moment by moment rather than biko. Being overwhelmed by the distance we have yet to travel. Step-by-step guidance also protects us from unnecessary mistakes. If God revealed the entire road at once, we might be tempted to act prematurely or take matters into our own hands. By revealing the path incrementally, He gives us the opportunity to trust Him in stages, learning and adjusting as we go. Each small step becomes a lesson in faith, patience, and perseverance. In this way, the journey itself becomes a training ground, equipping us to handle greater challenges and responsibilities as we progress. Walking one step at a time cultivates discernment. When the next step is revealed, it often comes with instructions, warnings, or encouragements specific to that stage of the journey. God teaches us to recognize his voice in the moment and to distinguish it from our own desires or external pressures. This practice strengthens our spiritual sensitivity, making us more capable of responding wisely in future situations. Step-by-step guidance ensures that we develop the habits and character necessary to follow God faithfully throughout life. God's incremental approach also builds confidence in his faithfulness. Each completed step becomes evidence that he is trustworthy, even when we do not yet see the entire outcome. When we obey what he has revealed today, we gain reassurance that he will guide us through tomorrow. This trust grows gradually, like a muscle being exercised. By taking small, obedient steps, we learn that God is consistently faithful and that reliance on him is far more reliable than relying on our own plans or understanding. The step-by-step journey also encourages patience. Life is filled with seasons of waiting, uncertainty, and transition. If we insisted on knowing the entire path before moving, we would likely become frustrated, anxious, or paralyzed. God's timing is perfect and revealing. The journey incrementally helps us develop the patience needed to endure each stage. Patience in following God step by step is not passive. It is active waiting that involves listening, praying, and moving forward in obedience when the next step is clear. Step-by-step guidance allows for flexibility. Life is unpredictable, and circumstances can change in ways we cannot foresee. If God gave a full roadmap, we might become rigid in following it, unable to adjust when detours or obstacles arise. By leading step by step, he ensures that we remain adaptable, learning to respond to his direction as it comes. This approach demonstrates that faith is not about having all the answers in advance, but about trusting God's wisdom and sovereignty in every moment. Finally, walking step by step draws us into intimacy with God. When we focus on the next step, we are compelled to stay close to him, seeking his guidance continually. This constant dependence nurtures a relationship built on trust, humility, and obedience. We experience God's presence in tangible ways as we move forward, step by step, knowing that he is faithful to lead us through each stage of life. In this way, the journey becomes not just about reaching a destination, but about growing in faith and character as we walk closely with him. God's way is always right, even when it's hard, because his perspective is far greater than ours. Human understanding is limited by time, experience, and circumstance. But God sees the beginning and the end simultaneously. What may appear difficult, confusing, or even unfair to us is part of a larger plan that we cannot fully grasp. The challenges and obstacles along God's way are often designed to teach, refine, and prepare us for the destiny he has set before us. His way may not be easy, but it is always perfect, and walking it requires trust that his wisdom surpasses our understanding. The rightness of God's way is not measured by comfort or convenience. Many people equate the right path with ease, but God measures it by purpose and faithfulness. When he calls us to endure trials, confront fears, or make sacrifices, it is not to punish us, but to shape us. Hardness in the journey often produces strength, perseverance, and character that could never develop through comfort alone. God's way molds our hearts, stretches our faith, and teaches us to depend on him rather than on ourselves. Following God's way also requires obedience, even when it defies human logic. There are times when his instructions conflict with our desires, our plans, or what seems practical. Yet obedience to his direction, despite difficulty, aligns us with his purpose. The rightness of God's way is revealed not always in the immediate outcome, but in the long-term impact on our lives and the lives of others. When we obey, even in hardship, we participate in a divine process that produces blessings, wisdom, and growth beyond what we could achieve alone. God's way often challenges our comfort zones. It may ask us to step into uncertainty, face opposition, or give up what feels safe or familiar. These moments are not meant to discourage, but to refine our faith and reliance on Him. The challenges along the path reveal our priorities and teach us to value God's guidance over temporary satisfaction. Hardness in the journey becomes a tool for transformation, demonstrating that God's wisdom surpasses our limited understanding of what is right or best. In the moment, even when the way is difficult, God provides the strength and resources needed to walk it. His way is always accompanied by His presence, provision, and guidance, which make even the hardest paths manageable. We may stumble, grow weary, or feel uncertain, but God's faithfulness ensures that the journey, though challenging, leads to the intended destination. Hardship becomes a proving ground for trust, revealing
I'll be all right. You don't have to stay. If you've already chosen, I won't stand in your way. I can feel it in your distance, in the way you barely speak, like your heart is somewhere else now, somewhere I can't reach. I was trying just to hold us while you slowly slipped away. Now I'm left with all the silence you didn't want to say. Maybe I just held on to something already gone. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. We don't need to fake the feeling, I can see it in your eyes. There's no reason left for staying when the love already died. Through the quiet in your voice, I can hear your choice. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I don't need a reason why, I can see it in goodbye. And it breaks me, yeah, it does, but I won't ask you to stay. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I'll be all right.